Hello, what's up? Welcome to The Cheapest Medicine. Today, this will be episode number 4, and we have a very special guest. We are bringing in former NFL quarterback, today GOATA Master Coach, Ricky Stanzi. Today, we're going to be talking about the GOATA GLS training systems, or the GOATA method. This is a method that I've used myself for my own rehab program, and this is something that I use still today when I'm training. As many as you know, 4 years ago, I was living with chronic pain. I was having different types of injuries where simple tasks like walking or sleeping were very complicated. GOATA method is one of those tools that I use to be able to recover and is responsible for myself to be able to run today. Not just me, there's other athletes and there's other people that using this type of method are having amazing results. As a coach, I will always say that training should go according to our demand. And at the end of the day, our demand is locomoting. Whether it's running, whether it's jumping, whether it's making a sharp stop and change of direction, whether it's swimming, whether it's swinging, whether it's throwing an object, etc. It all relates to locomotion, something that we have been doing since the day we are born. And our training should be always emphasized to have better locomotion. At the end of the day, that's what GOATA is about. And I know if you've seen the method, it's challenging a lot, strength and conditioning. And that's what I love about it. Because when something is new, something is getting great results, many times people won't go with it until you start realizing the amazing results that it's getting and the amazing results a lot of athletes are able to have when going under this type of method. With that being said, guys, welcome to the 4th episode of The Cheapest Medicine. Let's learn a little bit about this method and understand why something like this can be a game changer and something positive for the world of strength and conditioning. Hey, what's up, Ricky? Welcome to The Cheapest Medicine. Thank you so much for giving a moment of your time to be able to speak about GOATA, everything about the method. Why is it something that's actually changing things a little bit in strength and conditioning and is helping young and professional athletes? With that, welcome to the podcast.
Berto, thanks for having me, brother.
For sure, man. Thank you again. Now, going into GOATA, this is a method that I was able to find out through social media. And it is one of the main methods that has got myself to be able to run again after having many difficulties with my knees and my body and in general. And I know it's also helping young athletes, it's helping professional athletes come back from injuries and also improve their performance, which at the end of the day is the most important thing. So what can you say about GOATA? I know you got yourself into it again. You're really deep into it. You're one of the main coaches and you're doing an amazing job. As a coach, what can you tell us what GOATA is and everything that really consists of the method?
So, yeah, it's really a long journey for me, starting back when I first got drafted and I started looking at movement. But like you said, it was something that started with my own body, my own sort of, discrepancies, my shortcomings in movement that led me to try to figure out what was going on, what's wrong. I kept looking at literature and trying to understand movement. And I noticed that, man, we don't have it figured out. I can't quite understand why my own body doesn't work the way I feel it should work. Got into a couple books that I would consider my red pill books, Spinal Engine Theory by Grekovetsky and Muscles and Meridians. And like we were just talking about earlier, they started to point out things that were not present in the strength and conditioning community, that were not present in the movement training community, the rehab community. They started kind of talking about things that were contrary to what we were doing in the weight room. So that was a moment where I tried to kind of figure out what is underlying root cause of all of our dysfunction. And then I started looking on Instagram, and then I found the great Jose Bosch, Coach Gill, the founder, the first observer of this behavior that we call GOATA and this behavior that we call WOTA. And once I started talking to him, it was very clear. It was kind of like I had a bunch of red dots on the wall, like a conspiracy theorist. And now I could finally take the yarn and I could kind of weave through like, oh. And so I was having these epiphanies after talking to Gilly. And then one thing led to another. And here I am now, coaching in the system, helping the new coaches that are coming into the system. And the main goal is to recode people's bad movement behavior and get them on a track where they can A, get out of pain, and then B, perform at their best, reach their potential.
Yeah, I got to know about GOATA through Coach Cody and through social media. We had a conversation. He's the guy who introduced me to the method, and from there, I was able to talk plenty of times with Coach Gail and Coach Gary. And I'm going to say that at the beginning it was hard for me to adopt it and to really see how I could add this as one of the big tools for my career. Because of my background, if I look into, my college years and in my bachelor's degree, my master's degrees, and in everything I've been doing the last years in the sports and performance industry, it was hard for me at the beginning, but then I began to see the benefits of it. And the first benefit I saw is being able to run, jump, and do stuff that was practically impossible in the words of medical professionals because of the multiple injuries I've had. And then again, with my athletes the last 2 years working with Real Betis, GOATA is one of the big pieces of the puzzle of why many of my athletes were able to come back. And if you ask them about setbacks, there isn't none. They're able to play safely. They're able to play happily and improve their performance daily. And I think that's the most important thing when we talk about a certain type of training is their results need to be positive. And that's what really talks the most. I think that's what at the end of the day is what's going to speak the highest. And people are going to begin to buy what this really is. And GOATA, what I like about it is that, again, it focuses on locomotion. And that's what we do as humans. We locomote, whether we jump, whether we swim, whether we walk, whether we throw something, whether we hit something, it all relates to locomotion. And our training, and this is something I talk with coaches all the time, is our training or our athletes' training should be according to their demand, which at the end of the day is locomoting. So yeah, this is what I like about the GOATA method, and what I began to really admire of it is also the results you guys have been having. Now, Ricky, I know you played for the NFL. You were a quarterback, and so that means you've been on the big leagues, you've been on the professional sports. What can you tell me that needs to change in a sport like the NFL when we speak about strength and conditioning?
It's a great question, and it really goes for all professional sports. If you just take pro sports to start with, you've got tons of thoroughbreds. You've got tons of really talented athletes. And I don't think that the training community, the performance community, the rehab community, obviously I don't think that they're trying to hurt anybody, but we're also very unaware of how to predict and prevent injury. Right? If you look at the NFL just by itself, the ACL numbers, terrible. The Achilles numbers, terrible. The soft tissue injuries are terrible. And then you go in and you look at how they're training these thoroughbreds. You're still seeing the powerlifting derivatives. You're still seeing the Olympic lifting derivatives. You're still seeing these $1 million athletes stand on upside down BOSU balls, AirX pads, wobble boards, all this nonsense that once you actually watch slow motion video and you study it, and like you said, there's an incubation period. When you pay attention to how movement is actually being organized by the athletes that don't fall apart, you see that the training does not apply to forward locomotion. The training is actually decoding us and making us more WOTA. So we need to stop prioritizing the lifting engine and start prioritizing the locomotive engine, because on the football field, just talking NFL, everything is drive gear. Everything, the front seven, the O-line, D-line, linebackers, it's drive. The running back, drive. Quarterback, drive. Wide receiver, drive. The only couple guys that really use the back pedal or a reverse movement technology would be a DB. And that would only be to scan the field and take in information. But when they have to actually break on a route, it's drive gear. So you've got a situation where we have a lot of sports that are all built off of the locomotive engine, which was our default and is our default engine because we come from the hunter-gatherer lineage. We needed to walk, run, throw, swing, strike, barefoot, 8, 10 to possibly 20 miles a day, and then rest on the ground. Well, now you look at the lifestyle that we live nowadays, we're outside of that food chain, but it's still the same body, right? We don't need to hunt and gather anymore. The food's there for us. So now you've got a situation where we wear shoes that are basically sensory deprivation chambers, so like coffins for arguably the most important thing on the body, which is where the pressure is bottlenecking up through the foot and ankle. Then you're going on chair sitting marathons where you're basically locking the spine up, the hip up, the shoulder up. And then you go and you look at the training model and it's all lifting engine. So now we're doubling down on the lifting engine, which is teaching me to create torque off the inside of my foot. That same lifting engine pattern that we're overemphasizing in the training is the same pattern that you will see if you scrape 100 ACL and Achilles shred videos off YouTube and you watch them frame by frame. You're going to see a theme start to show itself. This theme is GOATA. Everybody's trying to create torque off the inside corner of their foot, and they're locking their tibias in place. They're trying to spin their hips out to create this lifting engine torque to propel myself forward because they've been taught this lifting engine in the weight room for hours and hours on end. And then the knee shreds or the Achilles shreds. So it's really if we don't take like we talked about earlier, a holistic point of view here, if we don't look to the past and kind of see what was this body designed to do? What is it? What are the specs of this? What is it actually designed to do? What is it built to do if it's out in nature? That's locomotion. Well, now you got a situation where we don't locomote and we overemphasize the lifting engine, and the injuries are reflecting that sort of miscommunication, if you will, between what we're supposed to do, what we're designed to do, and then what we can do since we got out of the food chain, right? And, now that we can exercise, or we think we need to exercise because, well, like I said, we're not locomoting as much as we were designed to do. And then everybody's working on their lifting engines and not building, like you said, that beautiful locomotive engine that allows you to propel force forward in a way that keeps you durable and fluid.
Great explanation, man. I mean, it explains one of the biggest issues that we have today. I mean, if we look at statistics, I think just in the United States, it's probably around 100,000 knees and hips that need to be reconstructed a year. And one of the biggest things that we hear is, it's multifactorial. Okay, yes, it's true. Yeah, multiple factors will affect an injury, and especially if we talk about it, something as degenerative that leads, to knees and hips being replaced. But when we look at habits, life habits from a person, like you mentioned, there's people who don't even move, don't do anything in their life. They're just completely stuck in a chair. They're completely, wake up, work, sit on a chair, go back to bed, probably don't even take care of their nutrition, probably don't even take care of their body pretty well. And then you start seeing, your life habits begin to affect you. And into performance, we can talk that it's very similar when we deal with athletes. I mean, I can talk in my experience that I lived through a lot of chronic pain through 2016 and 2017. I mean, it got to the point I couldn't even walk. And I was in that world of brace your core, everything in the middle. I was lifting a lot. I was in a moment where I just broke down. And and the interesting thing was, with strength conditioning and injury recovery, I learned that the same thing that broke me, which was movement, was going to bring me back. But what kind of movement? How would I have to move? And it was going back to teaching my body how to move the correct and efficient way. When I started realizing, okay, maybe my hips are too tight, but how are they too tight? Why? What's going on? What's going on? Why is this affecting my knees? Maybe my feet are wrong. And then I started realizing that I wasn't walking well. I was having those GOATA feet that we call the duck feet, which actually ducks the feet I wear for some reason. We call it that for some reason, but
it is ironic.
It's ironic, but I was walking completely, like you said, inside edge, completely collapsing the foot. And then you looked at what was going on with the knee. And yes, I was having a lot of issues. And my surgery with my meniscus happened in a very weird way skiing, but the same situation came from the way that I was moving, and, it led to injuries. And then when I started locomoting and training to locomote better, my body began to heal. I can run now. I can swim again. I can throw a ball again. I can do all the activities that I was unable to do because of the lifting and the type of stuff that I was doing. Now I can do today. And simply by understanding, if I teach my body to actually move, to actually do what it was meant to do, then I heal. And this will lead me to the question is, why do you think today this is something so hard to understand? And we're also stuck in, like, we have to lift, and in the typical back squat, the typical front squat, and the typical deadlifting, the typical Olympic lifting. Why is it that it's still hard today that people realize that maybe that isn't really helping in improving my performance and improving my athletes to run better, to throw better, to locomote better through a sport? What do you think that is one of the big issues?
I think a lot of it has to do with kind of the time factor. If you're looking at it, it's really about 3 decades, right? It's 2020, and you're probably talking back to the 80s, 90s-ish, where we started to see that uptick in performance training. And I'm putting air quotes there, where I'm going to start training myself lifting weights because, well, that's what everybody's doing. And it kind of becomes, it becomes an indoctrination for coaches, and it slowly became the normal. And so when something becomes a normal and it reaches out far and wide, not to mention it took time for that normal to get to the point where, pretty much every kid who's in high school is now working off of this 1 rep max system. And so I think it took time to get the 1 rep max system to be far and wide. And it also took time for us to see the gradual breakdown. You get year after year of the ACL number going up, the joint replacement number going up. And eventually you're kind of like, everyone's like, whoa, what's going on here? And so it's a situation where once we go back, everything falls apart, kind of go back to the beginning and say, where did we get this wrong? To simply put it, like we've been talking about, we doubled down on the lifting engine for a body that's supposed to be doubling down on the locomotive engine, right? If you just go back to what is a hunter-gatherer doing day to day, sure, lifting something off the ground is absolutely something that the human body can do. But if you take a step back and think about what that lifting may have been like for a hunter-gatherer, you realize that it would have only been 1 rep. They would have put it on the shoulders or on top of the head like they do in the indigenous communities, and then it would have been followed by miles of locomotion. Well, now, and then not only that, miles of locomotion with or without the weight, because you're talking about 8 to 10 miles of locomotion, barefoot, sitting on the ground. So they never let their lifting engines take over the locomotive engine, which is what we're seeing in modern society today. So now you look at us, we don't locomote, like I was saying, 8 to 10 miles. Now we go into the weight room, and by the time you left that weight room, if you did back squats, deadlifts, hang cleans, single leg lunges, if you did everything with a weight in your hand, you're looking at hundreds of reps where you're teaching your nervous system to prioritize creating torque with the lifting engine. And so what we're seeing is that overemphasizing of the lifting engine play out when these athletes go to run, because now they're creating torque off the wrong side of the foot. They've changed their locomotive engine to reflect the lifting. So they like to create torque off the inside edge. A wide receiver for the Redskins just tore his knee today or yesterday, I think it was, Kelvin Harmon. And you go to the pit and you go look at how he was training. Same garbage training. He's inside edge. He was inside ankle bone low. His right leg was moving in reverse. And that's how you tear the knee. If we go look at 100 ACLs, they're all going to be the same. So, it is kind of it took a long time for us to get to this point, about 3 decades. But now we're at that point where we're sitting here as a society, and there's nobody in academia or in the institutions that know what's going on. They're still pouring millions of dollars of research into ACLs. They don't realize, and I don't understand why they don't, because if you look at 100 ACLs, you're going to see the same pattern. It's going to be the same every single time, because that's how you would tear the ACL. You would tear the ACL essentially, if you had a shin bone and a thigh bone with the ligaments attached, you'd hold the shin still and you'd spin the thigh out. It's really the same thing that the athlete's doing if they go to cut, or if they land from the sky, like a picture of a volleyball player going for a spike, landing, and then tearing the knee. It's the same mechanism every time. It's the same mechanism in a contact injury. If an O-lineman's engaged with a defensive lineman and somebody comes down and blows out the knee, essentially that tibia and that thigh are now not in harmony and the knee shreds. So the simple answer, we overemphasize the lifting engine in a body that was meant to be overemphasizing the locomotive engine. If we can switch that and we can go back to overemphasizing locomotion, we will clean up the ACL and Achilles epidemic really quickly. But like you said, there's a lot of people that have been indoctrinated for 30 years, and that's going to be hard to take away what they thought was the right thing and replace it with new information, and that information really being rooted in, let's put our eyes on it. Let's use these supercomputers we have in our hands. Let's use a slow motion video to be able to make decisions about movement. Because if you look at the billion-dollar sports organizations, they've all invested in slow motion video. NFL uses it for the refs. NHL, NBA, MLB, they all use slow motion video. Why? Because the referees can't see everything with their naked eye. It's the same thing for movement. If you slow it down and you watch it, and you watch enough of it, you're going to see that GOATA and that WOTA pattern come out. The GOATAs are durable, the WOTAs aren't.
Very true. I mean, when you look at ACLs, especially, this is one of the injuries I've been dealing a lot with recovering athletes during the last couple of years. And if you look at their videos or you look at their mechanics of what happened to their tear, especially when you lead them to the running phases, you start realizing, okay, there's a lot to change. There's a lot that we need to work on because we want to prevent this again. And if we look at studies, I mean, that I read, and two of them that really were scary for the results was that in 7 to 10 years, only I think it was only like 30 to 25% of the people in the studies that suffered a tear were able to play for that amount of time. Most of them retore or had to quit because of pain. And the one thing that got me to question is what happened? What were they doing? Which is something that the study did not mention. What kind of training were they doing that didn't help them? Because if you go, I mean, I've spoken to different coaches, different physios, different doctors about the ACLs and how to prevent this and what to do when they go for the reconstruction or they went the conservative way, whichever, but they already suffered a tear. It's the typical, strengthen the quads, strengthen the glutes, strengthen. I'm like, yes, it's important. It has a point. Yes, I need to strengthen the muscles. The neuromuscular control needs to be there. And now activation needs to be there. Completely true. But I told this, and this is something that I do want to say, because for me, it was something I still cannot agree. And it completely surprised me when I mentioned in one of my meetings working at Real Betis was I sat down and I said, I think one of the biggest things we need to look at is how our athletes are running. And then, I mean, you want to do, the squats, the jumps and all that kind of stuff. You want to do those little gimmicks first. Okay, fine. But let's really look how they're locomoting, because our athletes get injured locomoting. They're not getting injured doing a back squat. And if they are, then man, just quit. Don't be a coach.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I would say. But one of the things that coaches said was, you know what, Berto? I can't control what athletes are doing on the pitch. That is completely nonsense. We cannot control how they're running. And for me, it was surprising because I was like, you know what? I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to do my own thing. You guys do your own results. And till today, I know after I left the team, till today, I have had zero setbacks with any of my athletes, especially when I coached them all with the GOATA method. All of them were able to move forward. Not one of them has messaged me, hey, Berto, my knee's hurting. I've had a setback. Some of them can just say, hey, man, I'm overloaded. I have a little bit of DOMS from the amount of work that we have been doing. But their knee is safe. And the one thing that you do mention is we have to look at slow motion video. And it's like you said, if the refs can't see a play, and we're all using, even FIFA brought it up with the big leagues today. With soccer, we're still having trouble. Should we bring in the slow motion video? Now they do. Why don't we do it more with strength and conditioning and injury recovery? And one of the things that I do wanted to ask you about GOATA, and I think it would be special to the listener to understand, is GOATA something that can be, it's something that people can get outside of the United States, or it's something that's just in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, it's worldwide now because of the sort of the interconnectedness of the web. So with social media, we're really at a time right now, unlike any other time in history, where everybody's got these smartphones, everybody's got these iPads, everybody can now start to surf and look for information on their own. If you look at really just YouTube in and of itself, that's a free glossary of movement that we can now scrape video from and we can watch it. It's been a very interesting time where the regular person who has no white paper on the wall, we could sit here with our iPads and our iPhones and we can start to look at slow motion video and we can start to discern for ourselves and we can start to ask questions. So it's really a case of the web allows us to have this slow motion video right there in front of us that we can scrape and watch. And then B, allows us to have these type of conversations, right? Allows us to connect with people across the pond and find out their stories. And like you said, everybody's going through the same thing, right? Whether you're in the US or you're somewhere else, everybody's hurting. The ACL epidemic's real because, well, everybody's largely sedentary. Everybody's going through the same things. The same way that GOATA will eventually spread and be worldwide, and it already is because we're having this conversation and we got plenty of coaches overseas, is really the same way that the 1-rep max spread. It became the new normal. Why is everybody on upside down Bosu balls and Airex pads? Well, somebody higher up said it was a good thing, and so we believe it's best practice wins. And so by putting forth our knowledge out there on the web, which we try to do as much as we can on Instagram. It has its drawbacks, but if you got Instagram, you got YouTube, you got Facebook, you got Twitter, now you can start to kind of look at things on your own. And then you can decide for yourself what's working for you. And like you and I would both say, man, we're both people that had plenty of injuries in our past. And we couldn't fix ourselves until we started, once again, overemphasizing the locomotive engine, because neither one of us had been doing that for 10, 20 years. And then we finally fell apart, right? It took 10, 20 years for our body to go, I can't do it anymore. And then it falls apart. And I think you're seeing more and more people get to that point where they're like, oh, these guys over here are telling me that it's okay to say I'm hurt and that they have a way to fix it. Well, I'm going to go see what they're doing. And so you can kind of bypass the institutions and the academia because of the interconnectedness of the web and social media. And that's what really makes this thing go. And GOATA is a grassroots production where you've got people all across the world connecting with each other, sharing stories and sharing the similar backgrounds of, hey, I was wrecked and now I'm not.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to emphasize on one key point that you mentioned, Ricky, and it is that best practice wins. As a coach, I see it in a different way. I say results speak the loudest. Those are the one that matters the most. And when we look at the GOATA GLS training system or method, you guys and myself have had amazing results from taking players or clients out of injuries, recovering, doing the whole rehab process, and then moving to the next level, which is actually improving their performance, which at the end of the day is the area where athletes want to be all the time. Nobody wants to be in the rehab mode. And when you start seeing athletes that, fall back all the time, and then you use GOATA and you take them out of that realm and they're actually on the next step, on that step that matters the most, which is performance, then you start realizing that the results are great. And again, you've had your great results. I've had my great results on myself and also with my athletes working in soccer the last 2 years at Real Betis. Now, going into GOATA and the method itself, there are two major factors that make the system, which is the pivot points, and the cornering factor. These are two things a lot of people ask us all the time because I posted about it. And again, these are the two pillars of the method. So Ricky, my question would be, what are the pivot points? What is cornering? What is this thing that we talk about? Because again, these are the major pillars of the method.
So pivot points, remember, when we're talking GOATA, we're talking energy systems. So energy systems are pivot point energy systems, meaning that energy is going to move around a corner. So for us as human beings, there's going to be something that we're going to put into the ground, and then we're going to move energy around that corner. A good way of visualizing this is a hurricane. You're looking at a hurricane, it's energy moving around a corner. If you're looking down, bird's eye view on a tornado, it's energy moving around a corner. The swell in the ocean, it's these energy systems in nature is all energy coursing around a corner. So for us, if you just look at the foot and you start with the foot, you have two corners to your foot. You got the inside corner, which is off the big toe, and then you got the outside corner, which is off the fourth and fifth metatarsals leading back to the cuboid bone. When we locomote, we want to move the energy off the outside corner or the outside pivot point. That is what a GOATA does. So a GOATA is going to land with the outside edge of the foot being the place where I'm going to create compression. That would be the eye of the hurricane. We call it inside ankle bone high. So that little inner ankle bone that you can put your hand on down at the base of your shin, that inside ankle bone needs to stay high on the landing and the leaving. You can almost visualize that as a funnel. So if that inside ankle bone's high, it's going to slope the arch, and I'm going to funnel now the pressure or the compression into the fourth and fifth metatarsals. Conversely, if I go inside ankle bone low and I drop that inner ankle bone low, now I'm funneling the energy and the pressure to the inside corner or the big toe. That's where all the injuries are happening. So all the ACL shreds, all the Achilles shreds are inside ankle bone low injuries because the athlete has put the inside corner of the foot in the ground, and now they are going to try to spin the storm in reverse. So now they're going to try to spin their shin and their thigh out to drive them forward when they should be doing what the GOATAs do, which is keep the inside ankle bone high, keep the pressure on the outside edge, and the shin and the thigh start out in a bow and then come around the corner, which is the cornering process, and the heel goes away from the midline, just like those trail storms go off of a hurricane. So the elbow moves away, the heel moves away, and the whole column meaning my side of my body, my ankle engine, my hip engine, the right side of my spine, if I'm just thinking about my right foot, and then my right shoulder, they're all going to load up into a bow, which is going to be rotary action outwards off that pivot point, and then slingshot back inwards around the corner. My inside ankle bone stays high the whole time. I keep the pressure on the outside blades of the feet or the outside corner, and my heel trails off and away. That's GOATA. That's how I stay safe. That's how I stay durable. That's how the body was designed to travel forward through space to keep me durable for a lifetime. Because going back to hunter-gatherers, you can't tear your knee out in the bush. You can't be running, pop an ACL, and think that you're going to continue on, right? It wouldn't have been built into the nervous system. That would have been a bad mechanism. So the ACL shred is something new. The Achilles shred is something new. And it really gets down to what's going on at the foot. If I'm inside ankle bone low, I'm going to funnel to my big toe. If I'm inside ankle bone high, I'm going to funnel to 4 and 5. Stay inside ankle bone high, stay on the outside edge, and then realize that it's just like a hurricane. It's rotary action out, rotary action back in across the midline, heel goes away, elbow goes away. That's how you move yourself forward through space.
Perfect, man. I know it's a long explanation, but
right.
To summarize it for the people, when we talk about inside ankle bone high, think about the arch of the foot. We always talk about, if you go into the technicality and the words that you normally hear in the medical system, we'll talk about pronation, and you don't want that pronation going on, and you collapse the arch. It's actually a strong arch. I mean, here we can talk about the three of them: the longitudinal, the medial, and the transverse arch. They're all working together, but simplified, and that's what I like about GOATA is the simplicity of the words to use, which everybody can understand. And this is something that needs to be more emphasized to training. I mean, I can say it that through my years through swimming, my years in soccer, it's something I still don't see. Even with the new equipment, with the new pulley systems that are out there, that they really want to focus on the eccentric forces and everything. I think they're great, but I always tell people, I will not put people into different fancy machines or fancy equipment if the fundamentals are not there. And that's something that I think GOATA really emphasizes and really makes you realize that if you don't have these guys, don't expect to go out there and do great. I mean, you can move, you can be fast, you can be, I think the word
get away with it for a little bit.
Exactly. I mean, the word we want to look for is longevity. And that's one thing that I've been teaching my athletes since I've been working with them is you want to be able to do this forever. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. You want your body to be doing this forever. You don't want to reach 60, 70, 80 and you're on a wheelchair or you're all messed up. I mean, yes, other factors can lead to that. You can have an accident, you got a disease or something happened. But when we talk about someone who is injured and you talk about, okay, why are you getting a knee replacement? Why are you getting a hip replacement? Why did you tear your ACL? Why are you having a meniscus injury? Why are you having so much chronic pain? And a lot of times you're going to hear, yes, there's a lot of factors that go into play, but movement, and this is something I'll take with one of my favorite coaches that I ever had was movement is king. If you don't understand that movement is the king of healing, movement is the king of how you are going to express yourself, and you don't realize the importance of it, then we're all messed up. And my question to you would be now, GOATA is a game changer. GOATA is something that I know is challenging a lot of the coaches out there. I see it on social media. I see it with people really arguing with you guys and really having a hard time. What is GOATA's end goal? What are you guys really trying to do? Because I know it's doing great, but I know it's really challenging a lot of people's academics and even views and ideas.
Yeah, I mean, the main goal is save the world's connective tissue. You know, our main goal is to wake everybody up to the fact that the training is destroying us, right? We're literally training ourselves to fall apart because of go back to the simple stuff that we talked about at the beginning. We're overemphasizing the lifting engine. We're overemphasizing this nonsense idea that I can train myself in this inside ankle bone low position and that I can make myself strong there. The tape says that's nonsense. The video says that's a joke, right? This idea that, well, I can train positions of vulnerability and they'll get stronger. That doesn't actually hold up. it doesn't pass the common sense test. And I'll give you an example. I use this one a lot because it hits home with people, because everybody knows who Kevin Durant is, right? Kevin Durant is an inside ankle bone low athlete. He walks inside ankle bone low, jumps inside ankle bone low, runs inside ankle bone low, lifts inside ankle bone low. If there was anybody that would be strengthening this pattern, wouldn't it be Kevin Durant? He's doing all these reps inside ankle bone low. If you're sitting there as a doctor or a PT and telling me that we need to train the position of injury, well, this guy's doing it all day when he walks. Then he takes a simple step back in a game and tears his Achilles, something that he's done routine for years and years. It doesn't make sense. Look at Alshon Jeffrey, wide receiver of the NFL, coming off the line to just run a route, tears his Achilles doing a simple step back to press forward. These are things that these athletes have done 100 times, thousands of times over their lifetime. Wouldn't they be strengthening that? Wouldn't there be technically no ACLs or Achilles if these athletes are all moving inside ankle bone low? Shouldn't they be strengthening the pattern? So the common sense says, no, that doesn't make any sense. So we're trying to kind of wake people up to say, think about it. You can't train these positions of injury and then go look at the positions of injury and then see where they're showing up. They're showing up in the Olympic lifting. They're showing up in the powerlifting, because inside ankle bone low torque off the inside corner, pronation, inflection, hip thrusting, that's the lifting engine. It's something that the body has adapted to do, but it's an offshoot to the locomotive engine. Remember, the hunter-gatherer. The locomotive engine would have been the default, and there would have been no way to overemphasize the lifting engine. It wouldn't have been a part of your day. You wouldn't have been doing Olympic lifts as a hunter-gatherer. It would be all based off of locomotion. If I did pick something up, we're talking 1-2 reps, put it on the back, take it somewhere. Everything's centered around locomotion. Now you got this training model that's all lift, inside ankle bone low, midline stabilization. All these words got to change. Midline stabilization, nonsense. Neutral, nonsense. Tripod foot, nonsense. Triple flexion extension. All those terms that we've all come to know and we all thought were the truth, they fall apart when you put the slow motion video on. That's what we're trying to do at GOATA, is create awareness and then show people there is a way to train durability. But the problem is, you got a lot of people that have spent 10, 20, 30 years teaching these concepts. They're not so comfortable walking away from them, and they're also not so comfortable saying that they've been wrong for 3 decades.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was one of those who was having a hard time understanding that things needed to change. I mean, I was so into the back squatting and the front squatting, and yeah, I got stronger in a squat. I was great at squatting. Tell me when I went running, when I went swimming, when I went throwing something. I always tell people is whatever we're doing in the gym should go according to the demand of your person. If you have a weightlifter, okay, yeah, we're going to weightlift. But if you have a soccer player.
That's the only sport that should be training the lifting engine.
Yeah.
The Olympic lifters and power lifters, go ahead, do your lifts. But even you, Mr. Olympic lifter or Mr. Power lifter, you still need GOATA. You know why? Because if you take inside ankle bone low to your walking pattern, you're going to need a new knee when you're 50 or 60. You're going to need a new hip when you're 50 or 60, because you can't do whatever you want to do. You have to appreciate base camp in what you were designed to do. Base camp is GOATA, whether we like it or not. We're designed to hunt and gather. It just so happens that we're out of the food chain, and we're the only species that has consciousness and creativity. So we can say, well, what can I do with this body since I've got all day and I don't have to hunt and gather? So now you get into this world of, well, I can competitively lift. Sure. And you still need to appreciate that base camp is GOATA. So yeah, even those guys have to still do the GOATA work to make sure they don't go inside ankle bone low. Go look at the powerlifting and Olympic lifting community when they get 50 to 60. They're wrecked.
It goes again into, you have to be focused on the demand of your athlete. And when we talk about especially locomotive sports, soccer, football, talk about baseball, swimming, I mean, every field, everything deals with that kind of stuff. And yes, I've seen athletes very, very powerful coming out, being, they're able to, if you squat well, yeah, you're going to be able to jump better. Yeah, we're not saying squatting is bad for you. No, it's actually one of the movements we actually train in GOATA. We just do it a little bit differently. We just don't, use the typical weightlifting style. We do it in a different way, focusing on, that's going to be your landing. That's going to be your drop-in point.
Yes.
And The same thing with the hip hinges or deadlifts or RDLs, however you want to call it. That's going to be huge for quartering. You know, your hips are really important to be able to create that torque. And
Yes.
GOATA, a lot of people think, oh, you guys are completely against, fundamental movements. No, we are actually
The
emphasizing
opposite. Yeah.
fundamental movements. The problem with a
Right.
lot of people, again, is they're so focused on, and I've seen it, and I dealt it with the plays that I was working on for years, is people would ask me, why aren't you training them to be neutral? I'm like, what is
Yeah.
neutral?
What
Who
is
lives
explain
in
neutral?
neutral? Who
Yeah. Tell
lives
me
in
what it is.
neutral? I mean,
Right.
I lived for many years thinking, you know what? Bending the spine is bad for you. No, the spine is going to bend. It's going to happen. Actually, how
Yeah.
about actually teach my spine to work the right way? How actually teach my hip to
Right.
actually move, to have control?
Yeah.
And then and what I realized as well is people always say, oh, the person has a weak glute. That's why the knee's suffering.
Yeah.
Okay, it can be one of the factors, but why is the glute really not activating in this gesture?
Yes.
You start looking at the foot, you start looking how they're
Yeah.
stepping when they're running, the way that knee reacts or is influenced by the movement of the foot. And then if you see if that knee collapses because of the foot collapsing, guess what's not going to activate? The glute. So the problem isn't the glute. The problem
Right.
comes from the way you're moving, and that begins with the feet. And man, it's something I keep emphasizing. I keep throwing. It's something that I think I repetitively shoot on Instagram. I really am the big guy who's like, you know what? Look at movement. Look at your feet. Look at GOATA. I mean, sometimes I tell people, you know what? It's okay if you want to do this type of movement, but you cannot move away from the fundamentals. And that's the interesting thing about GOATA. And it's something that I, as a coach, and I know you as well, and everybody on the GOATA team, we hope that it begins to change and people realize that the way we're training in the professional aspects which really affects the recreational aspects in the recreational environment. It really is affected by the professional environment.
Yes.
Needs to change because, as you said, we just had an NFL athlete who tore his ACL not too long ago.
Yeah, just a couple days ago practicing, right? Just running.
These guys are doing it repetitively every day. I had athletes here where I was working. I would see their movement and I wouldn't say anything because I'm to be professional. But when the catastrophic injury happened, I was like, I'm not surprised. I already saw how they were moving. I already saw what they were doing. And it sucks, but now we're going to have to recode and do through everything. And then when they go through the process and they're like, wow, man, this completely changed the way I was doing things. This completely makes me realize things need to change. So as we finish the podcast, man, is there anything else you would love to add here, to people to realize that GOATA is one of the methods that's coming our way. It's coming strong, and we really should look out for it.
Well, what I would tell people is trust your eyes, right? See patterns. Don't see yourself, and this is going back to kind of what you were touching on just now about the glute amnesia or the dead glute and all that stuff that we hear in the community. It comes from isolated thinking. Don't think in isolation. Don't think in separate muscles and separate pieces. See this body as an energy system. See how it builds pressure. See how it releases pressure. Notice that there is a pattern that shows itself, right? Pay attention to the patterns. Pay attention to the overarching theme of really, you are not separate from nature. You are an extension of nature. You move like nature moves. There's no straight lines in nature. There's no straight lines in you. And there's no straight lines in your movement patterns. Everything is spiraled energy, pivot point energy, energy moving around a corner, whether you like it or not. And this is why those concepts of triple flexion extension, tripod, neutral, midline, they got to go because they're not in harmony with nature. And well, we're nature, so they're not in harmony with us, which is why they are wrecking us. But you first need to see it, which means you got to look at the tape. If people don't look at the tape, they'll never understand it. You need to watch not only the GOATAs move, but you also need to watch the ACLs and the Achilles, because that will show you that there are patterns. In the macro world of movement, in the macro world of locomotion, patterns consistently keep showing up, and we'd be naive to not pay attention to them. We'd be naive to think that it's just a coincidence. I'd leave you with this. How many ACLs do we need to shred off the inside edge, inside ankle bone low technology before we wake up as a performance rehab industry and say, maybe we should try a different way? Because I don't know what that number is. I'd be interested to hear what a doctor would say there, because they've been trying it one way for a long time and it's not getting better. And over at GOATA, we haven't had any non-contacts in 4 years, right? We've taken people from the WOTA spectrum, and it's all verified in slow motion video. We have it all in the historicals, and we've moved them to GOATA, and we keep them GOATA, and we've shown you in slow motion who are the athletes that move well using GOATA, who are the athletes that don't move well using WOTA, and then we've taken human beings that are at the WOTA side, and we've moved them to GOATA. So we know the nervous system's malleable. Everybody would agree with that. It's a product of the environment. What environment are you showing it? But it all comes back to seeing it first in slow motion and then trusting your eyes and your common sense. And the next half of that equation is feeling it. Like you said with your athletes, Berto, when you show your athletes how to move well and they feel it kinesthetically, they can't go away from it because they feel too good. It's something that they're like, now you can't change that athlete's mind because they've seen both sides. They've seen the WOTA, they felt it. Now they've seen the GOATA and they felt that too. And they don't want to go back to the injuries that are unexplained. They want to stay healthy. So trust your eyes, people. Watch slow motion video. Follow us, GOATA Coaches on Instagram. Ask questions. We're always here to answer questions. We try to put out as much content as we can to help people start to get their wheels turning and start that incubation period. But it really is centered around slow motion video because, once again, our naked eye just can't see it. It's too fast. But when we slow it down, those patterns really do show up.
I think it's perfectly summarized what GOATA is, the importance of really looking into the method, and it's looking to help you guys, is looking to really change the game. When something is new, I know it becomes a little challenging. It becomes difficult. Some people will begin to feel a little bit threatened or just completely deny it because it's different. I was one of those. Again, I will repeat it. But once you start realizing how it can really change their lives, and I've seen it in my body, I've seen it in my athletes, from people who have had terrible sports hernias, hip issues, fractures, terrible destroyed ankles. I'm talking about knees that had 1, 2, 3 ACL tears. We're talking about people having low back issues, and see how these guys are able to come back. It just demonstrates you that the method, and not just the method, the way the GOATA is not, I wouldn't say GOATA is a method. GOATA is the imprint that it should be established to strength and conditioning. And like I said, like Ricky just said, I want you guys to start following GOATA GLS Training Systems. Obviously follow Ricky. He has his Instagram, which will be, I think you changed.
Red Pill Rick.
Red Pill Rick.
Red Pill Rick. Because I'm bringing you the red pill on movement.
You changed it, which I love the name. And I suggest you guys to follow him, look into him, even message him. I think Ricky is a very approachable coach. He will message you. He will challenge you. He will hit you up. And you'll get a lot of energy from him and a lot of good answers and a lot of good coaching from him. So, Ricky, with that being said, thank you so much for joining me today in The Cheapest Medicine, for sharing and talking about a method that I respect a lot.
Hey, I appreciate the platform, bro. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Ricky. And with that, I also want to thank everybody who's been listening. I hope you've enjoyed this 4th episode of The Cheapest Medicine as much as I did. And stay tuned to the 5th one. We will have another continuation about sports, another continuation about injuries. We will have a professional soccer player on the women's side of the Real Betis Balompié team, and we will speak about her recovery from an ACL reconstruction, going all the way through the rehab, coming back to playing the sport. Stay tuned.